Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to really get into a specific bit of the Bible, First Chronicles Chapter 2.
That's right.
Now, I'll be honest, when you first glance at it, it looks like, well, just lists of names, genealogies.
Yeah, it can seem a bit dry, can it? Like
Yeah,
reading a phone book sometimes.
exactly. But stick with us because we think there are some genuinely fascinating insights hidden in these lists.
Absolutely. This chapter is basically a family tree, a very detailed one. And our sort of mission today is to figure out why this was so important back then.
And crucially, what it might mean for us, for our faith today.
Precisely. So, where do we start?
Okay, so verses 1 and 2. They lay the foundation. They list the 12 sons of Israel.
Right. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, all the way to Asher.
These are the guys, the patriarchs of the 12 tribes.
Okay.
It sets the scene, the broader context for everything that follows.
It establishes who we're talking about, God's covenant people. Then verse 3 immediately zooms in on one son. Yep, Judah. And it mentions his sons, but also includes the, well, slightly unusual story about Tamar, his daughter-in-law.
She bears Pharez and Zerah to Judah. And it's mentioned right up front.
It is, and it tells you something straight away, doesn't it?
What's that?
Well, that this history isn't going to be all neat and tidy. There are complexities, unexpected events right from the beginning.
Yeah, good point. It mentions Judah had 5 sons in total. But that detail about Tamar, it definitely makes you pause and think.
It does. It perhaps hints that God's ways aren't always conventional, even in establishing these important lines.
So moving on a bit, verses 5 to 17, we follow the line through Pharez and Zerah.
And pretty quickly, we bump into another interesting figure, or maybe an infamous figure.
You mean HR, verse 7?
Exactly. A car, or Atan as he's known elsewhere, called the Troubler of Israel.
Why include him so prominently? It's quite a negative label.
Well, I think it grounds the whole thing in reality, doesn't it? It shows these aren't idealized ancestors. There was failure, sin, consequences.
Makes them more human, relatable perhaps.
I think so. It adds a layer of realism. But the line continues, and this is where it gets really significant.
The line from Ram down to Jesse.
Yes, you get Ram, then Amminadab, Nahshon, who was a prince of Judah, quite important.
Right.
Then Selma, Boaz. People might recognize that name from the book of Ruth.
Yes, Boaz. And then Obed, and finally Jesse.
And verse 15 lands the big one. Jesse begat David, his 7th son.
David. King David. This is a huge connection.
Absolutely crucial. This genealogy is tracing the line that leads directly to one of the most pivotal figures in the whole Old Testament.
And of course, the line Jesus would eventually come from.
That's the ultimate significance, yes. The chapter even includes David's sisters, Zeruiah and Abigail.
And Zeruiah's sons Abishai, Joab, Asahel. Pretty famous warriors in David's time.
And Abigail's son Amasa, too. It's giving you a wider family network, not just the direct male line.
Showing how interconnected everything was.
Right. Then, verses 18 to 24, the focus shifts a bit. It branches out. We get the lineage of Caleb.
Caleb, another major figure from the Exodus generation.
Yes. Through his wives, Azubah and Ephrath. And notably, their descendants include Hur and then Bezaleel.
Bezaleel. Now, that name rings a bell. He was involved with building the tabernacle, wasn't he?
The chief artisan, filled with the Spirit of God for the task. So you see, even these seemingly minor names in a list connect to major events and roles later on.
It shows everyone had a part to play. It's not just a random list.
Not at all. It's weaving a story. We also see Hezron, another key figure, marrying later in life.
Right, the daughter of Machir, and their son Sigub, whose son Jair controlled loads of cities in Gilead.
It demonstrates the growth, the influence, the expansion of these families over time.
They're not just names. They're becoming significant forces in the land. And Hezron had another son mentioned, Asher, the father of Tekoa.
More expansion, more descendants settling in different areas.
The verses 25 to 41 really dive deep into the descendants of Jeremiel, another of Hezron's sons.
And this section is quite extensive, isn't it? Lots and lots of names.
It really is.
Yeah.
It underscores how meticulous they were about keeping these records. They mattered.
Deeply. And nested within this list is another one of those intriguing details.
You mean Shushan,
Yes, verse 34 and 35. Shushan had no sons, only daughters.
which in that culture for inheritance and lineage was a potential problem, right?
It could be seen that way, but what does he do? He gives one of his daughters in marriage to his Egyptian servant, Jarha.
An Egyptian servant.
Yeah. And the lineage continues through them. It's quite remarkable.
It really is. Again, it sort of challenges expectations about how lineage works, about who gets included in God's plan.
Exactly. God's purposes unfolding in surprising ways through unions you wouldn't predict.
So then the chapter swings back to Caleb again, verses 42 to 55.
Right, more details about his descendants through various wives and concubines.
And here we see lots of connections to places. Father of Ziph, father of Hebron, Beth-zur.
It's linking the people to the land they inhabit. But then there are a couple of really key place names mentioned.
Kirjath-jearim, and Bethlehem.
Bethlehem. Verse 51 and 54 link Salma specifically as the father of Bethlehem.
Which circles back nicely, doesn't it? Bethlehem, the city of David.
And looking forward, the birthplace of Jesus. It reinforces that connection again and again.
It's like the genealogy is constantly pointing towards that future significance.
I think it is. And the chapter wraps up by mentioning families of scribes in Jabez and even the Kenites, descendants of Moses' father-in-law, who lived among them.
So showing different roles, different groups integrated into the society.
A diverse community, all recorded as part of this extended family history.
Okay, so we've walked through the chapter, seen the names, the connections, the unexpected turns. Let's talk application. How does all this ancient listing, strengthen our faith today? What's the takeaway?
Well, for me, one huge thing is just seeing God's faithfulness over time. Generation after generation after generation. He's preserving this line, keeping his promises.
Yeah, even when we read names we don't recognize, they were real people, part of that promise unfolding. It shows God is incredibly detailed, incredibly patient.
And as we mentioned, the inclusion of people like Akar, or the situation with Tamar or Jarha, it's a massive comfort, isn't it?
How so?
Because it shows God doesn't require perfection. His plan moves forward through real, flawed, complex human beings and situations. That's good news for us.
That is really encouraging. We don't have to have it all together for God to use us or for his plan to work.
Exactly. And the sheer detail, the importance placed on heritage and these connections, it reminds us that we're part of a bigger story, too.
Our lives, our families, our faith didn't just appear out of nowhere. We're connected to generations before us.
And ultimately, seeing the line of Judah so carefully traced, leading towards David, and then knowing it leads to the Messiah, it just powerfully reinforces God's reliability.
He makes long-term promises, and he keeps them, even if it takes centuries.
It should build our confidence in his plans, his timing, his character, even when things seem mundane or confusing in our own lives.
Like reading a list of names might seem mundane.
Right. But even in those details, God is weaving his purposes. It encourages you to look for his handiwork everywhere.
So wrapping up this deep dive into 1 Chronicles 2, it's way more than just a list, isn't it?
Oh, definitely.
It's a testament to God's faithfulness, a realistic picture of the people involved in his story, and the clear map showing how his promises unfolded, pointing towards Jesus.
It really anchors your faith in history, in God's long-term, reliable action.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to take away.
How does it change things when you see yourself not just as an individual, but as part of this incredibly long line of faith, this huge tapestry God has been weaving throughout history? How does that perspective impact your life, your struggles, your faith journey right now?
Something powerful to reflect on.